What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're checking out the Lille Regionals results. There were 573 Masters Divisions players in this Sword and Shield through Lost Origin Standard Format Regional Championships last week. And this will be relevant for anyone attending the Warsaw event and also for LAIC to a certain extent. LAIC, the Latin American International Championships, will allow Silver Tempest cards to be legal for that event. But, this format is only a few cards off of being relevant for the Silver Tempest format. Silver Tempest is going to add like Serena and Lugia V Star, maybe the Reggie Drago and Reggie Lucky cards. But other than that, most of the decks that we're talking about in terms of the Lost Origin format will still be relevant in some shape or form. So these results are probably good for most competitive players and people following the competitive game to observe. Before we get into looking at these deck lists and my thoughts on the placements of the decks, be sure to check out all of my sponsors in the description down below for coupon codes, links, etc. And also make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily Pokemon TCG content and leave a like and a comment. So, Mew VMAX won the event, Blissey got second, and then we have some familiar faces of the top decks. We have Tina Lost Zone Box at 3rd and 6th. We have Palkia and Teleon at 4th and 5th, Arceus Giratina at 7th, and Kyurem Palkia at 8th. So I think out of all of these decks in this top 8 bracket, I'd say Arceus Giratina and Kyurem Palkia are probably the ones that I'd least expect to win the whole event. I think Mew VMAX, of course, is an inherently powerful deck that can pretty much find a way to beat anything. Blissey Miltank has its unique strengths. It's all basic Pokemon. It lacks that those mid and late game consistency issues of finding your evolutions and finding your certain pieces and things like that. But it can also be a little bit of a lower power level deck if the opponent's able to neutralize those Blisseys before they can get too many energies onto them. Also, the Miltanks in the deck can find very, very favored matchups against some decks for Blissey. Against Arceus Giratina, they have the Shred attack to go through Blissey, but against other Arceus decks, like maybe Arceus Pikachu, there comes a point of a stalemate, and then against a deck like Kyurem Palkia, if they're not playing the Empoleon Vs, that can also be a very hard, Miltank can also be a very hard counter to a deck like that. So I do think Blissey Miltank had a shot at winning the whole event. I think Tina, Palkia, and Teleon, Mew as well all had a shot at winning the whole event. I think Arceus Giratina is a little bit too much of a variance heavy deck and a consistency problems deck that you can't play your way out of bad starts with this deck a lot of the time. And Kyurem Palkia, similar but not to the higher extent of Arceus Giratina, having some issues where you can't actually make plays to change the outcome. And when you get into the top 8, the top 4 of the finals, those things matter a lot more than they might throughout day 1 of the event or even day 2 Swiss of the event. I think having that player skill difference, or at least the chance for player skill difference and deck skill difference, the ceiling that the deck can reach, I think those are very important factors once you get into the later brackets of an event. So I think Arceus Giratina and Kyurem Palkia really lack those things, lack the player agency. Now, also I should mention, I think Blissey lacks player agency a lot of times as well, but it has attributes to the deck like the Miltank that I mentioned that can just hard counter some decks and get to the top placements or even a win from there. So let's start out with the 8th place deck. Martin played Kyurem Palkia. And just like I was mentioning, some of these decks will be omitting Empoleon V completely. This list did not play any Empoleon V at all. But Kyurem VMAX is a super strong VMAX Pokemon, 330 HP. It deals 120 plus 50 damage for each water energy you discard from this Pokemon, and its Glaciated World ability will help you get water energy onto Kyurem or even onto other Pokemon, especially when you are combining it with Oranguru's Primate Wisdom to set that top card to be exactly what you want for the Glaciated World. Palkia V Star, obviously a very strong Pokemon in its own right, in its own deck of Palkia and Teleon. Palkia V Star here is going to be mostly for the Star Portal to really power up Kyurem VMAX, sometimes a Radiant Greninja, sometimes an Ice Q, sometimes itself, but mostly it's going to be giving extra firepower to Kyurem VMAX so they can one-shot things, but Palkia V Star can also be a fine attacker in this deck. Radiant Greninja, the Concealed Cards ability, is a staple of this format. Discard an energy and draw 2. It's really, really great. And then Moonlight Shuriken, swing 90 at 2 different things. Can be amazing versus some decks and mediocre versus others, but Radiant Greninja is always going to be getting some use regardless of what you're playing against because of its Concealed Cards ability, and the Moonlight Shuriken is decent at worst against the matchups where it's less relevant. Crobat V for some draw power, Lumineon V to search for supporters, Ice Cube block phase 70, and then prevent damage done by attacks from basic Pokemon next turn. That's going to wall out the Regigigas deck and also wall out the Blissey decks. On to 7th place, the Arceus Giratina. So Arceus V Star is going to be the bread and butter of this deck. Trinity Nova swings for a nice chunk of damage while also getting basic energies onto your Pokemon V. And it has Starbirth that you could just search for whatever 2 cards you need to make the game go the way you need it to go. If you need Boss's Orders and an Energy, if you need Professor's Research and a Giratina V, if you need Path to the Peak to shut something off, you know, whatever it is that you need, Starbirth can always get it for you. So Arceus V Star has that reliability aspect to it, as well as the really good damage output and energy acceleration. And we're going to be accelerating that energy to Giratina V Star with 280 HP, and the Lost Impact attack. Star Requiem is not an option in this variant of the deck. We're just using Lost Impact for a Grass Psychic colorless. It does 280, and you put 2 energy attached to your Pokemon in the Lost Zone. That can be a double turbo, and it can be a double turbo attached to something else. It doesn't have to be attached to Giratina to pay for that cost. But Lost Impact, 280 is a lot of unchecked damage output for this card to have, which is why it can succeed. I just feel like this deck is not very reliable and not very consistent and doesn't give you a lot of player agency to do the things you want to do, which is why it's a deck I personally steer away from. Radiant Gardevoir is going to make your Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks, Bibarel for some draw support, Crobat V for more draw, Lumineon V for supporter search, Guru to Marnie proof yourself a little bit, put something on top of the deck, and also Pumpkaboo to remove either your own or your opponent's path to the peaks. At 6th and 3rd, we have a Giratina Lost Zone box. We'll take a look at the 6th place list first, see what differences we have. This list is not going to be using Thornton. Instead, it'll be using a 3-3 line of Giratina V Star. And of course, we have the Comfy with Flower Selecting. That's going to be getting us cards and also putting cards into the Lost Zone, because we're going to want 7 cards in the Lost Zone for Mirage Gate to pop, so we can accelerate 2 different basic energies at a time from our deck to our Pokemon. We'll want 4 Lost Zone cards for Cramorant's Lost Provision, so it can attack for free with Spit Innocently. We'll want 10 in the Lost Zone for Sablei's Lost Mine, so that we can put 12 damage counters however we like. And we'll also want those 10 cards in the Lost Zone for Giratina V Star's Star Requiem that just instantly knocks out the active Pokemon. Palkia and Teleon, we have a 5th and 4th place. This one from Fabian. Palkia, of course, we've already looked at for the Kyurem deck, but this is going to be the main card of the Palkia and Teleon variant. We're going to be wanting to attack with Subspace Swell all the time, doing a maximum of 260 damage prior to things like Choice Belt and Quick Shooting. In Teleon, Some decks also play Leon to pump up that damage a little bit more. This list is not playing Leon. You will see that they're playing the rare Candy to get down that turn 2 Shady Dealing sometimes. It's a really good attacker turn 2 against the single prize Lost Zone box decks. A capture energy, a little bit extra consistency of getting out the things onto the bench that you need, especially when your damage output is based around how many benched Pokemon there are. This is a very tactical deck, even though it has one main attacker, because the tech and the strategy of the Palkia deck, I find, is mostly based on its trainer lineup. So you have things like Echoing Horn, you have Lost City to get rid of your opponent's single price Pokemon that are easier to knock out. You have the rare Candy, like I mentioned, Scoop Up Net to reuse effects, Cross Switchers to Gust without using a supporter, Roxanne plus Path to the Peak, or even Marnie plus Path to the Peak. There's a lot that goes on in the Palkia deck in the trainer lineup, even though you're just trying to beat them down turn after turn with Subspace Swell, damage wise and Pokemon wise. We have another Palkia list here. This one's choosing to play the Crabominable V with Destroyer Punch. It does 90 damage plus 60 more for each damage counter on the opponent's active Pokemon. So if you could just quick shooting it, then this attack is doing 210. If you quick shooting plus Zigzagoon, it's doing 270 plus the 30 that's already there from the ping damage. And you could also work Choice Belt into that. So Crabominable can get those big one-shot knockouts that are just impossible for Palkia to ever reach. But it does come at the cost of having this 4 retreat cost basic Pokemon sometimes. As your starter, you don't really want to see that. It's not going to happen too often, but it is a clunky Pokemon to make good use of. Then we have Nico's third place Giratina list. This one is going to be using Thornton and a 2-3 line of Giratina V Star, since you have that Thornton option to get the Giratina V from the discard onto the bench, switch it with a Pokemon that's been down for at least one turn, so you can immediately evolve it into Giratina V Star using a little bit of a different strategy than the other list. This list is also opting for the Temple of Sinnoh, which can help against the Regigigas deck, of course, especially when paired with Roxanne. We've also seen some Giratina lists choose to play Collapse Stadium for its help in the Palkia matchup, and also for getting something like Lumineon V off of your own bench. Then we have the top 2 decks. We have Blissey Miltank. Now, this deck actually costs less than 40 bucks, and it got second in a regional. Always love to point those things out for newer players or younger players, anybody on a budget that wants to try out a highly competitive deck. This deck costs less than 40 bucks. That's really great for a competitive trading card game at the highest level. So Blissey V has 250 HP, and it swings full with one attack, Blissful Blast, for a single colorless. It does 10 damage plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. And if you did any damage with this attack, you can attach up to 3 energy cards from your discard to this Pokemon, and that's any kind of energy. So we have powerful colorless that makes your attacks do 20 more. We have double turbo that counts as 2 energy, but your attacks do 20 less. Capture energy, when you attach it from your hand, you can search your deck for another basic Pokemon and bench it. And lucky energy, when the Pokemon this card is attached to is damaged by an attack or knocked out, you get to draw a card. So you can attach any of these kinds of energies from the discard with Blissful Blast, and then next turn you're building up this huge Blissey that can either remove energy from with Hyper Potion to heal it, or you can just keep racking up the energy on the Blissey so you do more and more damage over time. The Miltank is a very important part of this deck because of its ability Miracle Body, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon V. So this can just essentially wall out any kind of deck that has no way to do special conditions or damage counter placement or any kind of attack that goes through effects, or decks that just don't play any Pokemon that aren't a Pokemon V that can attack in their deck. And then you have a mediocre attack route doing 10 plus 20 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon, but it doesn't matter at what rate you're knocking out Pokemon. Even if you're just doing route for like 10 or 30 or 50 damage at a time, that's fine, because your opponent in this case, if you're using Miltank, can't knock out the Miltank because of Miracle Body, so you could just take your good old time with route and chip away at the opponent. And finally, the first place list is the double turbo variant of Mugenisect, playing 0 Fusion Strike energies and 0 Meloetta. Mew VMAX is your only attacker here with Cross Fusion Strike. Choose one of your bench Fusion Strike Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. And you can copy either Technoblast for 210, and then you can attack next turn. You can copy a benched Mew VMAX's Max Miracle for 130, and it goes through effects. Or you can copy a Psychic Leap to do 70 and shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. So the Pokemon lineup is very simple and very small. Energy, we're just playing 4 double turbo energies. And then for trainers, there are 44 trainers in this deck. So this is going to be a very trainer heavy deck. And the trainers you're choosing for your deck are very important to the outcome that you will get with this in games. So they're playing the one Roxanne plus a Path to the Peak. Even though Path to the Peak hurts us because of Genesect, Roxanne Path to the Peak, swing and take a knockout late game. We're not going to care about our Genesect next turn if we just knocked out our opponent's main Pokemon and then we left them with a hand and a board that they can't do much with. Same goes for Marnie. Very good to have that disruption. Avery can be good against a lot of things. Against Palkia to lower their bench. Against Regigigas to make them discard some of their Regis that they need. Against Mirror Match to maybe make them discard like a Genesect that they need to draw cards with. And then we have Silene, which is really great in this deck because we can use all of our power tablets or maybe all of our cross switchers, or maybe our one-off Path to the Peak or Pokestop or Echoing Horn, and we need some sort of combination of those cards back. We can take a chance with Silene and maybe get 1 or 2 of those cards back on top of our deck and then draw into them and get to use them. A lot of times this is going to be used for power tablets. In personal experience, power tablets are very popular target for this, since we're needing those power tablets to do extra damage to take the knockouts. This is just a very aggressive, try to take knockouts whenever you can oriented type of archetype. And it gets the job done. It got first place here at the Lille Regionals, and the deck costs less than $100, and there's a Mew Max League battle deck coming out soon, which is going to make that even cheaper if budget is a concern for anyone watching this video. So those are the top 8 from the Lille Regionals. This was the most recent major event that happened. So yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments about any of the decks or anything I talked about today, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.